Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, natural language processing. You've probably heard those words thrown around in different settings, and everyone is trying to figure out how to take advantage of that technology to improve their business. Today, Aaron Wright with MasterControl, who's one of our directors of product management, is going to talk to us about how artificial intelligence will impact the life sciences industry in both the quality and the manufacturing areas. Before we get started with our webinar, let me just go through a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any technical difficulties today, there is an icon at the bottom of your screen labeled chat. Just chat us if you're having any problems hearing or any other technical issues. We'll try to get your problem resolved as quickly as possible. Should you have any questions today, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions at any time during the presentation. We'll go ahead and address those questions at the end. And with that, let me turn it over to Aaron.
Thank you, Jen. As Jen said, I'm Aaron Wright. I'm the Director of Product Management at MasterControl, and I oversee our quality systems software. We have been incredibly blessed at MasterControl, very forward-thinking in how we've designed our software to have that connected platform of information across all of our modules. What's so important now is being able to create insights and data connections between each of those points. It's wonderful now to be able to have an observation from your audit, launch a corrective action against it, and within that corrective action, launch a document or a manual retraining for an employee, and have all that information linked and together in MasterControl. And now we're able to take that one step further. And I'm really excited to show you some of those practical applications of how we are diving deep into that data to have a real life impact on you and your business processes. So what we're going to cover today during this webinar and this presentation and conversation is what most industry is doing with analytics now, what is available across the board, across industry, how people are generally looking at analytics and the data processes, as well as what these kinds of key insights into the analytics help with quality and manufacturing and building quality into your manufacturing procedures, pharma procedures, life sciences procedures, as part of that quality 4.0 mindset. We'll also look at where analytics and AI, artificial intelligence, are headed in the future. There is a lot of buzz, like Jen was saying at the top of the presentation, around big data. I believe right now it's estimated to be a $62.8 billion industry by 2023 per Gartner. And so there is a lot of growth and opportunities to be able to share additional insights and to make those kinds of connections with your data moving forward as part of the platform of your data and analytics processes. And then really what that future looks like with life sciences in mind. You know, it's one thing to be able to predict who's most likely to buy this lotion from Target. It's an entirely other thing of both being able to predict and give recommendations on the best disposition of a non-conforming product, or the most identify the key risk areas of a certain product that comes off the manufacturing line as a way to determine potential impacts to patient safety. And so we're really excited to cover those things with you as part of this presentation today. So I wanted to go through 3 of the key types of analytics. We typically, when people think about reporting and analytics and data, they're thinking about those tabular reports, those Excel sheets with a column of this form was launched on this date by this person. Here's the title, here's the products, etc. There's a lot more to data and the types of analytics that you can have and pull from your quality events and information. And so we wanted to help share kind of what those platforms look like. So the first one is that descriptive analytics. And essentially, this is designed to be what's happening, what's going on in my software at this given time. It's a very static, single point of view snapshot. What CAPAs are late? What users haven't done their training? Which audits are coming up in my audit schedule? So very descriptive of here is the data and here's some conclusions that I've drawn about the data of what's happening right this second. We can then move into predictive analytics. Predictive analytics looks at things as what's going to happen. So based upon forecasting and seasonality algorithms that we can determine, given the previous set of data, what do we think is going to happen next? So given X, Y, and Z pieces of information, we think that these users are going to be late on their training, whether it's due to having, 50 training tasks pending up in their My Tasks, or historic performance of how frequently they've completed their on-time trainings, and being able to really make those predictions about what's going to happen within the data based upon that historic information that we've captured. And then the third level is getting into that prescriptive analytics of not only do we think forecasting what's going to happen and making a prediction about what's going to happen, but then prescribing an action, saying, here's what we think you should do about it. So we think that they're more likely to have a late training for X, Y, and Z variables that we have determined and decided on. We think that, based upon historic previous interventions and based upon the kind of data that we've seen, sending an email out to these targeted users is a really good recommendation to help them complete their training on time, for example. And these are very simplistic examples, but that make it very simple to understand what these different types of analytics are doing. And this predictive and prescriptive analytics crosses over into that realm of that artificial intelligence and machine learning, or AI and ML. And so it's very interesting to see that with all the data that we've collected, that there's a lot of really excellent insights that we can make based upon past performances, predictive forecasting and seasonality, and then in the best effectiveness checks that were done. So like when we do our CAPA processes, as we roll out changes for preventative actions, we can do an effectiveness check and say, what is the best way that we can prevent this from happening in the future? And did it help? Did it work? And using that information to feed it back into that ML loop for the prescriptive analytics to provide the next best recommendation for, hey, these users have late training. We think that when we sent an email for the past 3,000 times, it actually prodded people into completing it. Or if we sent an email to the supervisor or directly to their quality group, that we were able to see some improvements in the completion of the training tasks. And so having that prescription of here's an action that we think that you should take based upon the historic data and the predictive information of what we think is going to happen.
So, Erin, that brings up a really interesting point with respect to the difference between descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. One of the things that we talk about quite a bit is the massive amounts of data that flow through the quality and manufacturing departments, and that really at the end of the day, it's not possible for one human being to be able to analyze all of that information in a timely manner. So that's where the AI and the ML really come into place. But still, after those algorithms have kicked back some information, you need that human approach, that human filter put on it to really kind of determine what exactly your business should do. So it's really a complementary function between using technology, but also using human reasoning to pair with it.
That is an excellent point, Jen. So one of the things that people look at, and there's a lot of fear in current industry around AI and ML, of it is very easy and simple to over rely on AI, is that artificial intelligence is just as flawed as and machine learning is just as flawed as the data that goes into it. At MasterControl, we have a saying, of junk data in, junk data out. If you're putting poor processes into MasterControl, we're going to make your poor processes go faster, as opposed to having a really critical eye of what's the best quality process to achieve your quality means. Same thing with your quality data. If we're not structuring our data, if we're not being very clear about the data going in, we are going to get junk data out. And we want to make sure that we aren't, all data inherently has biases built into it because it's our previous actions and what we've chosen to do. And it's very important to make sure that you separate that concept out of a recommendation of what should I do and the automation of the action of having the AI run the entire process. One of my kind of favorite examples about this is with hand dispensers for soap dispensing. And the way that they work is that they have a light emitter that comes out. And so when you put your hand underneath it, and it does the light emitter, and it's basically with how much light is reflected, it's now, your hand is now different than the floor. It puts out soap. It works differently if you have different skin tones on your hand. And that's not inherently bias of the machine, but it's bias of the architecture. And so what we want to make sure is that we're not necessarily moving to the point where the AI is doing all of the function. You still have that human element, like Jen, you were saying, of truly making the decisions, as opposed to solely turning it over to the machines and the analytics process. So Where are we now? Within Master Control, like I was saying at the top of the call, we are very lucky that we have started the digitization process back in 1993. Master Control has been at the forefront of the digital experience for quality management systems since the dawn of time. And so, pre Part 11, which came out in 1997. And so we are very lucky that we have this natural integrated platform of all of the data, which makes it much, much simpler for us to be able to transform that data and get some key insights about what's going on with our individual functions and processes. So within Master Control, we are rolling out our Master Control Insights product, which gives it's our visualization and dashboarding tool, which is going to be the foundation of the data product family within Master Control. So we are creating those at-a-glance dashboards that help you get that real-time descriptive analytics, exactly what is going on right this second. One of the things that we've heard from one of our customers using Insights is that they love the idea that the data is language neutral. You can see on a screen a huge spike in deviations for a location in Rockville, Maryland. And that can translate across all languages. You're not trying to look at a single tabular report and draw conclusions based upon this many, all these different rows of data and understanding what they mean. You have a visual chart of the bar is much higher here. And so it's a kind of a language neutral descriptive analytics process, having that visualization and dashboard information. And it also gives you a lot of accountability and responsibility for the data going into the system, is that we're no longer digging and trying to find our CAPAs to see which are overdue and haven't been closed out yet, or customer complaints that have gone past a 30-day window or whatever your internal procedure policy is for closing out complaints. You have a lot more accountability and visibility truly into the data to make those good decisions. Part of that quality 4.0 mindset is building in quality decisions based on data, those data-driven decisions. And so having data and access to that data and those visualizations of the data at every level within your company. So your line operators for your manufacturing lines, your quality group, your manager group, your C-suite, all being able to see the different kinds of data that mean something to them. So being able to pull out different KPIs of how many deviations have we had this week versus last week, how much non-conforming have we gotten from non-conforming product from supplier A versus supplier B, and being able to get those very high-level views, as well as here are the 6 CAPAs that are overdue. Here are the periodic review of our documents that we think are at risk based upon how far along they are in the process. And what this is designed to do is have all that data, again, in that connected digital platform that Master Control provides. So we're no longer trying to export things out to Excel, manipulate them through pivot tables and VLOOKUPs, and introduce human error into that data manipulation process outside of the core system, is that you have this native data built into the product. And one of the great things about being on the cloud is that we have insights to a lot of that data, if you pardon the pun, that we can start doing some benchmarking. We can look at past performance and saying, overall, you've averaged around 30 deviations a month. Maybe we should bring that, let's make a plan to start figuring out how we can bring that down to 20 deviations a month and start having benchmarking goals and warnings and alerts when we're beginning to approach those individual goal, numbers and benchmarks. We can do some great statistical analysis looking at standard deviations, which helps us with forecasting and understanding what the next, forecasting for that predictive analytics process. We can look at all kinds of trend lines of how are we trending up? Are we, how are we trending on the amount of line down scenarios where we've had to close down a manufacturing line due to X, Y, or Z issue, and being able to have some really key information just natively as part of the Master Control product about all the data that you're currently storing in Master Control.
Erin, that was really insightful information. And when you start talking about the abilities that you have when you can analyze that much data all at once, I'm sure there are quality managers and all the way up to the C-level who are excited to hear about those kind of improvements, because that really means business improvement. And business improvement means better quality products out the door a little bit quicker, revenue to the bottom line a little bit faster. Those are all things that are very positive when dealing in a competitive industry. and give you a competitive advantage.
It's so important to have empower all of our users with the data that's available to them to make the appropriate decisions based upon their role in the system. And so if I'm a line operator and I'm seeing something, some results coming back, maybe I'll get an alert saying that the information that I put in for the calibrate, for a certain test that I ran is running higher on average across all the lines. And maybe this is not just a small issue on just this line, it's across all the lines, and being able to raise that flag as an individual user. There's a great case study that I'm excited to share with you to kind of talk through this process a little bit later on in the presentation. So one of the key areas that we're focusing on with our Insights product is getting the key data around training. When I was a configuration consultant and setting up quality systems for our customers, one of the things I would always say when talking about who should be required to take the training, how often are you be verifying the training, and should you be waiting on releasing of a document till you have 100% training on that? And my catchphrase was, if you have 100% training on all of your documents all the time, you need to take that show on the road, because there is not a single customer that I know of that has perfect training compliance within their system. And so that was one of the really key areas that we wanted to focus on as part of the Insights product, of being able to surface that information in really compelling and interesting ways to help figure out and lay that foundation for the data product family for making that predictive and prescriptive analytics functions. So within the training module, we're looking at training laggards. What of our departments that we necessarily see the least amount of training compliance of completing our training prior to the due date, and being able to slice and dice that data in lots of different ways to really get to the root cause of what's going on here. So looking at training by the user supervisors, overdue training by department, overdue training by document type, overdue training by job role or job code, to really get a key idea of where are we seeing these trends, where are we seeing this information, so that we can dive into their root cause. And these trends and KPIs really give that key insights to your manager levels and your C-suite above, so that you can say, overall, our Salt Lake City office has 98% compliance of on-time training. Our Rockville, Maryland site is having 52% compliance of on-site, of on-time training. What is the difference here? What are the key areas that we're seeing? Are they manufacturing different products? Do they have different quality teams? Are the supervisors all 20-year veterans, using MasterControl, are very competent being able to find the information? Are they all brand new people to industry, and they're not quite sure how to navigate the quality management system to understand what's going on? And so we wanted to be able to drill up and drill down to every persona, every type of user, to make sure that they're getting the data that they need to be successful in their jobs. Data in a vacuum, data for data's sake, does nothing. You have to do something with that data. And so we wanted to make the data that we had available and consumable and actionable by everyone for everyone who has needs for those data. So the next portion that we want to look at is modern QEM, the quality event management. A lot of this information is still descriptive. We're still trying to describe what's going on. Where are we in creating our corrective actions? What are our immediate dispositions of what's been happening? And as we move into kind of what those preventative and effectiveness checks and verification checks of the preventative action. We're seeing some limited predictive capabilities. So being able to look at who is going to be in the right role to take on the name responsible person for this CAPA within this product. So having a little bit of understanding of, hey, this is going to be the best group to manage this CAPA. This is going to be the best person to manage the CAPA for this product. What's very difficult in a lot of quality event management is the siloed information when it comes to the analytics and reporting and trending. One of the great things about MasterControl, as I said at the top of the presentation, is we have that connected data. We know when a customer complaint comes in that it was linked to the deviation, and that the deviation that came in was then linked to the CAPA, and that we're able to trace that information across all of our forms. What's very difficult for us to grasp and understand is the long-term trends, is that when a complaint comes in, what's the most likely disposition of that complaint? Is it likely to turn into a deviation? Is it more likely to turn into a CAPA or a nonconformance? Or an EMDR? Like where are the most likely paths for that customer complaint for this company given past performances? What's the most likely ultimate completion take? Because they can be child formed. You can launch a form from a form from a form. As you go further down that rabbit hole, trying to really understand that root cause and risk assess the issue that happened. And so understanding from the beginning to end, where does it start and where does it stop, and what is the ultimate disposition of that issue? And really being able to report on what those trends look like across all of your complaints, across all of your deviations, for example. And so without that information from a connected platform, without that information having that trended across all of your products, for example, it'd be really hard to understand the extent of a given problem. And even beyond then, being able to the extent of a problem and then the ramifications of those issues. And so if we're seeing repeated complaints that come in with certain symptoms, people can type in a free text field. It's in a text box, what they hear when your call center is taking a customer complaint, and they're putting in all the information that's coming in. That free text field and that unstructured data can make it very difficult to then start having transit information around those complaints coming in, and understanding that, hey, 6 months ago, we made a change to the supplier and now it's causing people to be itchy. As a random example, then we're seeing itchy and scratches and rashes and hives coming out as a more often complaint coming out into our complaints form. So what we're looking to do as we move forward is to build in some natural language processing into those complaints forms. So being able to tag those very similar symptoms as kind of and bundling it together to start doing some trending of information. So so you're not having to do those individual word fields tagging. So looking at itchy, scratchy, rash, red, raised bumps, etc., all can generally mean the same thing, is that you have some kind of skin irritation. And so being able to have some natural language processing to bundle those information together to make it a lot simpler to see, hey, there might be only one complaint that came in with a complaint of itchy, but there's been 17 that have been grouped under that skin irritation category. And maybe we start needing to sounding the alarm of this type of complaint. To then understand the long-term ramifications of that complaint. And so without that connected data, without that natural language processing of those free text fields, without really diving into the data itself, it's going to be very difficult to surface and understand the information coming out of your system. And this is where we get into the MasterControl Premium Insights. There is a lot of information that MasterControl provides out of the box with our Insights product. But we know that there's going to be more, and there's going to be more slices that you want to have of your specific data. So one of the things that we look at is authoring, being able to come up with your own visualizations and reports based upon your own specific information. One of the customers that I worked very closely with has 17 different sites where they have rolled out MasterControl. And we built some KPIs, those key performance indicators for training compliance. And they wanted to have unique KPIs for every single site. And so building in that feature and that functionality natively into their product. And so we can do that. We can do that through authoring and kind of creating your own KPIs and dashboards and adding those filters. And we can do that through those custom expressions. So one of the great things about Insights is it's designed for non-business intelligence analysts. I am not a BI analyst. I am not an Excel guru. Google is my best friend when it comes to Excel. However, with Insights, it is the best. It is designed to be used by non-BI people. So I can write very complex SQL expressions of how I want my data to be displayed natively in the tool in language that I understand, in very natural language, to help me build out my own custom expressions. So I can do create a custom expression using this KPI, this KPI measure of overdue training, and add a filter where the site and the vault is only for my Philadelphia site. and it's overdue by this many days. And I can create that custom expression, that individual measure to make the data meet my needs as a customer without any additional information, coding, updates, Excel exports natively within the tool. And so I can make those very unique custom expressions to meet my specific business needs within the product. One of the great things about Insights Premium is it comes automatically with advanced analytics, so that clustering of information, so you can start to seeing those trends of skin irritation, for example, that benchmarking and trend lines. And again, the key part of the Master Control product is that connected data. Having all of your parts of your quality management system and your manufacturing system all aligned in a single place, that we can see which line item operators are associated with the most often human error deviations. We can see which line operators haven't completed or are completing their training late on a more frequent basis, which means that they can't do certain operations and are preventing work from being done and holding up a production line during their shift. That we can see even more information, especially as about the trends that we're seeing across all of the information across all of our quality event managements, which brings us to kind of the case study that I wanted to chat through a little bit and mentioned earlier.
I think, Erin, anyone that's out there listening to this presentation today who dreads the times that they have to do reporting, right, and going to gather all of that information and then try to compile it into something, think about the time savings that those individuals will have, those quality managers or quality directors will have with access to dashboards. And then take it a step further, like, if something happens, right? If something happens with a quality event in your organization and you're tasked with determining what the issue was or what caused, finding the root cause, you'll now be able to do that so much faster, easier, quicker, right? You'll have it at your fingertips. You won't be stressed out. Well, maybe you'll be a little bit stressed out, but you won't be as stressed out when
you
people
won't be
are
stressed about the data.
Yeah, you won't when people are clamoring for answers. Like, you'll have an easier way, a more defined path for finding that information. So I think that's, when we start to think about the day-to-day, just some of the maybe not so fun parts of our day-to-day work, and how utilizing these technologies is going to make those parts of our work a lot much easier, make our work life a little bit better.
You bring up a really great point, Jen. One of the customers that I worked with Insights is a large tier med device manufacturer. And we were talking about some of the default reports that we're going to be creating through our KPIs, dashboards, and collections. And her eyes just got so big. And she said, "Do you understand that it takes me easily a week of effort to pull in my quarterly reports of how we're doing across all this information, and I can export this in less than 3 seconds." Just the amount of effort and work that now doesn't have to be done just to get the out of the box insights was so impressive and just life-changing for where she can now start focusing her effort. Like you were saying, that the 80% of the time on the 20 key areas, and compiling quarterly reports, while absolutely important, isn't always the best use of our time. And so if we can make that faster so that we can then focus on those really key high-risk areas, it's so important and transitional for digitizing in the quality systems. One of the case studies I wanted to talk about as well is another Insights customer that we were working with when they were taking part of the Insights project. And one of the key items that came up for them was that they wanted to, their regulatory inspector during their audit said, "Show me all of your quality events for this supplier." And so there was, supplier A, and they had to individually go through each of the data sets and find, okay, here's all the CAPAs that mention supplier A. And then individually go through, here's all the deviations that mention supplier A. Here's all the nonconformances that mention supplier A. And it was a very arduous process for them. And the inspector picked up on it and said, "You can't report on this quickly. You can't trend on this information. How are you really assessing your suppliers when they come through? How are you doing a critical risk assessment? How are you doing your regulatory, your regular inspections of audits of your suppliers if you don't have this information at your fingertips?" And it was an audit finding for them as part of their regulatory inspection. And so one of the key dashboards that we are natively planning into Insights is we're calling it our Connected by Quality dashboard. And it's essentially all of that shared data fields that we have within our quality event systems of being able to report on Show me all of the quality events by supplier. So show me all my CAPAs, deviations, nonconformances, not the customer complaints because supplier isn't necessarily attacked there, but show me all of my quality event forms that mention this supplier, that are linked to this supplier. Show me all of my quality event forms that are associated with product A, for example. And you can use that information, you can use those dashboards and eventually the benchmarking of if the number of quality events coming from supplier A exceeds a number that you set it to, that should kick off an audit. That's going to start looking at a for-cause audit, is that we have seen X number of issues across our site for this specific supplier. We're seeing an uptick in trends for the supplier. And we have this data now at our fingertips, and we can set off immediate trend lines and alerts, letting us know that this supplier is coming up on their benchmark and that top level of events that we're willing to accept from a supplier, because life happens and not everything happens perfectly all the time. And that maybe we need to kick off a for-cause audit at this point. And you can't do that without that connected data, without that digital platform, without having very connected data within that prescriptive and predictive insights information, or even having that predictive information of, we recommend that you should kick off a for-cause audit for the specific supplier based upon the number of quality events that you have for them.
Right. Avoiding an audit finding. I think that's like, that's worth its weight in gold, right? I mean, you think about, we keep talking, Erin, today about efficiency and saving time and putting your resources where you need it most, and putting resources into business improvement. When you can start to, how much follow-up time does it take after you have an audit finding to go ahead and rectify that situation, when you could have prevented that in the first place, right? Those are huge time savings and headaches that technology can now provide to quality and manufacturing departments.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that we have the technology do the mundane stuff, right? Like at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is that we don't want to do the mundane tasks, right? Let's let the technology take care of the mundane stuff, and we'll do the stuff that's maybe a little bit more fulfilling as part of our work life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So a lot of what I've described is kind of that foundational of that data information, getting access to the data, having that connected data, really describing what's going on in your system at this time, and I'm really understanding what those connection points are. And that's what the MasterControl Insights data product is. It's the foundational level of the next parts of that data product family to come out. And so with our individual insights and that descriptive of what's going on, we're going to be able to draw some conclusions and some predictions and prescriptions about what's going on with your data and what we think you should do from there. And here are some of the key ideas that we're talking about that we are beginning to lay the foundations for with that Insights product for future releases. So we'll be looking at things like machine learning capabilities, forecasting. When do we think that we're going to see a large amount of our periodic reviews coming up? When do we see a seasonality in how much throughput our MX lines are having? Does that just go down very drastically in December because of the holidays, or does it go down a lot in August because it's hot and people are taking their vacations? And so having that forecasting of, here's when we think that you might want to optimize the amount of effort and optimize the information for the individual functions based upon how much throughput we think is going to be given that season, given that month, or given previous performance. We can look at optimized workload, is that we can have a very complex statistical analysis of what is the best, who is the best person to take on as the named responsible person for this CAPA, based on how many, if it's going to be a quality engineer or a quality analyst, how many does each of them have? What are their key areas of specialty? And really optimizing the recommendations for balancing workload across your entire department, as opposed to having the 2 or 3 people who pick up everything because they're knowledgeable about everything, and really kind of giving those recommendations. And then also having it reduce the amount of error rates or competency levels within the organization. So having machine learning predicting and kind of giving recommendations for, here's what we think the disposition of a product might be, or here's what we think the best training approach is going to be for this type of information based upon historic information. And so having all that data available to us in the cloud, having everything digitized and connected, we can then start training that data set of what we think is going to happen next based upon the current data that we have available to us. And that's kind of where we're just kind of beginning to get into that predictive analytics for machine learning. And not just predictive analytics, but predictive machine learning capabilities built natively into our events forms, our quality event forms.
So that's another point, right? So if there are people out there who are overwhelmed, thinking, hey, I did not learn this as part of my career development. This is not information. Like, I don't know how to build algorithms. I don't know how to implement machine learning. I don't know how to do that with my data. That's where that expertise is built into the product. So don't be thinking like, uh-oh, we don't have that role in our company. How is that going to work when we implement this technology? The beauty is it's kind of like all built in there for you. And as Aaron said earlier, when MasterControl has access to anonymized data, that's going to allow us to be able to generate other pieces of information that we can then put into the product to make the product work better. So don't worry, you don't have to become a machine learning, natural language processing expert in order to use this technology.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point for another one of the machine learning capabilities that we're looking at right now is industry benchmarking. So not only benchmarking against yourself and your own previous historic data, but like Jen was saying, in the cloud with that anonymized data, being able to look across other industries or companies in your industry of the same type who has the same types, sorts of product, and being able to have some industry benchmarking of here's how other med device manufacturers are doing within your space. And here's how many CAPAs in general, here's what I would see as the average. This might be the benchmark that you might want to target for the amount of CAPAs, and you're either above or below that, and where should we have any concerns around that information? So another thing that we're looking at for some of that machine learning capabilities for our analytics. So the future of QEM and where we're going with modernizing the quality event system is looking really deeply at that predictive and prescriptive machine learnings. And so thinking about, like I was saying, we have that active process of effectiveness checks within our preventative actions measures. And so when there is an event that happens and we need to start a CAPA, having some recommendations of what we think the corrective action should be and what we think is going to happen when we do that, and what other areas are going to be impacted by that corrective action. You never want to have the cure being worse than the disease, right? And so you can put in a corrective action immediately to stop an issue that may have a cascading effect across the organization, and having that being able caught and have those processes be built into the QEM as part of the considerations for when you're going through a corrective action. Making those really, like I was saying, making those key departments, connections between different departments. And so again, understanding what that waterfall effect is of a decision is that, a butterfly flaps their wings across the world and all of a sudden there's a hurricane, of really understanding what that connected nature of the data and the information together looks like for the individual process. We're looking at self-investigating CAPAs, is that when an event happens, we're going to know where that data comes from. We're going to know what the data is connected to. We might be able to pull back information from the production lines to understand here was a series of events that occurred that we think led to this CAPA to occur. Here's what we think the root cause was based upon the historic data that we have and the data around this specific instance. And as well as based upon historic data and what we think the criticality and the risk that you've assigned to different products, we can provide disposition recommendations. So if there's a non-conforming product based upon what you've done historically and the type of non-conformance that it is and the risk, here's what we think that you should do with it. We think you should quarantine. We think you should scrap. We think you should rework, etc., based upon previous information and previous approaches that you have done on that type of product or that type of issue in the past, to again really harmonize and provide that consistent experience for our quality events.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to with what you were just talking to here, Erin, is really making good decisions based on data. And when you can make your decisions based on data, you don't waste time, right? You don't end up getting in a death by CAPA situation that we talk about, where you're just launching CAPAs because you're not quite sure. And so to be on the safe side, you go down that path, or you scrap a load because you're not quite sure what the best thing to do is. And you want to be as safe as possible, right? We don't want to have any poor quality products entering the market. But if you didn't have to scrap that load, or even better, if you're able to know what causes that and fix the problem before it even started, I mean, those are huge business savings, both in time and in resources for organizations.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, better data makes better decisions. Being a data-driven company allows you to make those decisions not based on emotion or gut feelings, but truly the data and the underlying data that supports them. So for premium insights and what we're looking for the next phase 2, phase 3, phase N release of the product is that we're looking at improving some efficiencies around our manufacturing lines, about where are we seeing some trends in lower yields for each of the lines? Where are we seeing trends on deviations? And really being able to track and mitigate the risk of those manufacturing products. And so if we find a fact pattern of events that we hadn't considered previously between all the connected data, of when we think something is going to go sideways as part of a manufacturing process, and being able to have that information built into the manufacturing process, and have raise warning flags earlier of, we think a deviation might occur at this step based upon the data of historic information. And one of the things that we're working very hard on is closing that gap of the gap of awareness, right? And so often there are several items where something will happen on Monday, it'll get to quality on Friday, and we'll have to go, and with the quality, we realize there's an issue on Friday and start launching that deviation or that investigation to what happened. And having that gap of, it happened on Monday, no one technically reported it until Friday. We didn't see that gap. And so being able to track and trend those, and then provide some recommendations earlier in the process of, hey, most often quality raises a flag on this. We recommend that you might want to launch a deviation, or make it a conscious decision not to launch a deviation because of X, Y, and Z, and tracking and following that information. And also looking at that predictive maintenance. And so there are lots of process quality engineers who are insanely talented about trying to figure out when equipment is going to need to be recalibrated, when equipment is going to need maintenance, when it's likely to need to be replaced, et cetera. And they try to do their best in all the real world scenarios. And sometimes equipment breaks before it's supposed to. Sometimes equipment stops working the way that it should before it's supposed to, when it, we might need to up that calibration cycle. And so having that a little bit more predictive information based upon not just on what the initial recommendation was, not the current recommendation in the manufacturing line for the process validations, but also based upon historic data of being able to track that statistical information across the manufacturing process. So a key part of how we get there is gathering the data. You don't start building your house at the roof. And so you have to kind of really lay that very solid foundation of your building to be able to build upon it and make additional assumptions and information based upon that very, very solid foundation. So the very first thing that you have to do is gather, connect, and integrate your data. You have to have that solid foundation and platform of good data to make decisions on. Before that you can start using that as the baseline for any predictive analytics. Because again, we're using that baseline of that data to make the determination of what we should do next based upon historical information and recommendations and risk levels and regulatory requirements around, say, risk and assessments and considerations. And so it's very important that we have that very strong foundation. So like I was saying before, junk data in, bad processes out, junk data out. You need to make sure that you have very good data available to you so that you're able to understand and interpret that data in meaningful ways. It is not enough just to have all of your data dumped to an Excel spreadsheet and tell your group, okay, good luck. Here's all the data points that we've ever collected. Let us know what trends you find. That's just not something that's humanly possible. And so you need to be able to have that data and interpret it in meaningful ways and attribute meaning to that data. And so I can pull in all kinds of data points from our system, and without understanding the meaning behind it, without understanding here's the why behind the disposition recommendations, you're not going to be able to go into the next levels of the data analytics process, the predictive analytics and the prescriptive analytics. So it's important to have that data have meaning attached to it, to understand what the data actually is capturing and measuring and truly is, as opposed to what you are presuming that data is presenting. This will allow me to start surfacing issues and risks in areas where I can grow or capture more data, or fields that I'm seeing that, hey, it'd be really great if I could slice this information by X, but we don't include that as part of our process. If we pull in this quality event form, I can start reporting on X and get those really compelling and interesting insights across the information. Once we kind of surface that information and surface those connections and understand the interrelated nature of the data, we can start pinpointing those connections and relationships to really understand the long-term effects of what that descriptive data is going to be able to provide us. So it's such a key part of the functionality to have that a rock solid foundation to build your house upon when building your house of analytics.
And just like a house, Erin, it doesn't happen overnight, right? Gather, connecting, and integrating all of your data. You don't have to have the entire organization connected with all of the data in one place to start. You could just start with one area. You could start with one site. And then roll out to other sites, or start with one area and then roll out to other areas and other departments, right? It's always important, I feel like, because these conversations, first of all, using machine learning and artificial intelligence is all very new. And then when you think about the stuff that you have to put into place to be able to utilize it, it can become very overwhelming. You can think, oh my, it's going to be decades before we can even get. You should just get started. I was listening to another presentation and a gentleman said, no matter how hard you think it is, just do one thing. Just do one thing to make that move in that direction. And then you'll build some success, and success breeds success, and you'll start, and eventually you'll get better at it. It'll ramp itself up. Things will, you can roll out to additional sites. So always keep in mind, you can take small steps to get to that place that Erin keeps talking about.
No, absolutely. And look, big data only gets bigger. And so the earlier you start and kind of start rolling out at one site by site by site, the more you're chipping away at the big data that is available to you across your organization. So one of the key parts that we want to look at is having really good data practices. Like I've said again and again, junk data in is junk data out. As we're working on this data and as we are transforming it and slicing it, dicing it, 6 ways to Sunday, you want to make sure that the data you have is meaningful, accurate data. If you are pulling in, if you did death by CAPA and you have 1,000 CAPAs for things that weren't necessarily supposed to be a CAPA, it's going to be harder to train your system to understand when we think something should be escalated to a CAPA, when we can give more formal recommendations around that information. So having that really clean, unbiased data is so important when training your machine learning algorithms. Obviously, data integrity and security of having the right data that's not garbled, that we didn't go one row off of an Excel import where everything is now not the same as it used to be, as well as that data security, that inalterable data. It's so important that when we're making and drawing these conclusions on our data products, that they are based in fact, that this is in fact the good data. And data recovery. And really, one of my favorite things about the data world is that you're never really sure what's going to come up. I'm sure everyone is looking at the last data point here, from pastries to cancer cells. There's an amazing machine learning anecdote that is out there that was written up in some industry papers recently, that there was a bakery in Japan. And they had over 200 different pastries, and they are not wrapped. They didn't have barcodes on them. And so they trained a machine learning algorithm to basically scan the picture of someone's tray and memorize the look of over 200 pastries to determine what they should be charged when they're going through the bakery, and picking out the different pastries. And what they found is that this process was really transferable to being able to identify unique cancer cells by basically looking at the shape and being able to compare and make relational observations against all of the different pastries and all the different cell shapes and types. But basically, this machine learning algorithm that was designed to be able to make pricing very simple and fast for pastries can now diagnose cancer. And so what's so fascinating is that by having that good data, building that good structure and information, that you can then have it be transferable to whole other industries and whole other approaches just by having good, clean data that's associated to it. So some of the practical applications, we've talked about the high level, the benefits, and being able to kind of do root cause, but some very practical applications of machine learning, particularly in the advanced QEM world, is being able to automate, name, or recommend a named responsible person. Just saying, historically, Aaron has owned everything for product. Let's, this type of issue came up for product. We recommend that it's going to be Aaron. You just not having to lock that down by role rights and role configurations within the system. Is that just based on historic information? Here's who we think is the best person, who should be the owner, the kind of the point of contact for all this information. There's recommendations for non-conforming product or deviation dispositions of should we recall, should we scrap, what, based upon historic risk, based upon the cost to the company, and based upon the product quality and any impact on patient safety, what's a recommendation that we think we should have for this based upon what you've done previously, and those kind of key areas of where we're trying to mitigate risk or mitigate cost while maintaining quality and safety. Like I said, predictions for that likely deviations, narrowing that awareness gap, and being able to have a recommendation and raising a flag early saying, under this scenario, has it had deviation logged after the fact on a regular basis? We should probably log deviation at this point to make sure that we are closing that gap and maybe being able to prevent significant issues from happening, or prevent significant issues from happening as part of the process in real time, or even having predictions for line downs. And so based upon a fact pattern of historic data and based upon information or shift details or call out structures, et cetera, we think that there's going to be a line down scenario where something is going to go wrong and it's going to cause a line down, which, anytime a line goes down, there's obviously significant quality concerns, time concerns, money concerns. And so anything that we can do to predict and mitigate those and raise those flags earlier will be so key and important for industry moving forward. And then obviously looking at those complaints, trends, and causes. We touched on this earlier of having that natural language processing, that NLP processing and tagging of different types of information to be able to see trends beyond just those individual keywords. And so looking at things like rash, red, bumpy, itchy, scratchy, and really have it headlined under that skin irritation item to then start being able to track and trend all of our complaints under that umbrella, as opposed to those one-off informations, and trying to hope that people catch up on the trend as they see a bunch of different complaints. So there's a lot of really practical applications to the quality event and manufacturing field that we're really excited to roll out once we have that foundational house built with that good data descriptive processes in place.
Yeah, I think the question the audience, our listeners and here today should ask themselves is, what impact in my workflow, in my organization, what impact would 1 or 2 less deviations mean? What would, instead of unplanned downtime on the line, having planned downtime, what impacts would those have on my organization? And that's where you can start to make that case, whether that's to the C-suite or other people, other decision-making people inside the organization, about why and how this type of technology should be implemented in this industry, and how specifically for your company, it could make you more competitive, or more efficient with your resources, or just eliminate some of the pains that you deal with, like audit findings or quality events, right? Those are the types of questions you have to start asking yourself to really see the value of what a technology like this can provide.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've officially reached the question and answer portion of our webinar today. I have a couple of questions that have come in for Aaron, so let's go ahead and get started. How do you manage data from your outside systems?
Yeah, that's a great question, because obviously customers, while everyone should be using MasterControl for everything, we don't necessarily provide that the necessary needs for everything. So we're not an ERP, we're not an MES system, and so want to be able to commingle your quality data as well as your enterprise resource data, your product data, and your manufacturing information. And so what a lot of companies are doing, and what MasterControl will be doing, is having a natively built-in data export API that we're able to kind of pull that data out and put it into kind of a third-party data lake. If you have a corporate data lake, a lot of our larger tier customers have their own corporate data lakes, to be able to import and commingle that data together. So because you can get some very compelling information about batch quantities and risk trends, for example, that might not natively be available in any single system that you're using.
Awesome. Okay, so just a clarification question here. Can you explain the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Oh, that's a great question, and we should have covered that at the top. So machine learning is a subsection of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is essentially looking as a process by which that we give it a bunch of data and we ask it to do something, and it gives us that information back, and we say yes or no. Artificial intelligence is kind of the umbrella that covers all different types of information. So things like natural language processing is a type of AI. And so, and as machine learning is a type of AI, and so kind of that artificial intelligence is that overall umbrella of all the different concepts of teaching machines how to respond to different information.
Do you think that this technology is going to eliminate careers in quality, or maybe decrease the demand for careers in quality?
Not at all. So this type of technology is designed to make those jobs easier and have them much more laser focused on the areas where they can have the greatest impact. We're not ready for a world yet where machines are making decisions about patient safety, about is a product to determine based upon all the information, is a product available, and should this batch be released to be surgically implanted into someone's brain, which is coming out with a lot of those new medical devices. We're not there yet. There's a lot of human interaction that's there. These tools are designed to augment the human interaction. We're not trying to replace everybody with robots. We're trying to have the robots do the hard part and the statistical analysis, and have humans make the true decisions, because there's a lot more that goes into something than just the data going into it. So like we've said throughout this call, junk data in, junk data out. You want to make sure that you are putting in good data, and you want to have those fail safes in the event that bad data gets into the system and a poor recommendation is made. And so it's going to be more important than ever to have key quality positions available as part of your system.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this a little bit. It's the need for human reasoning, right?
Mm-hmm.
The machines are good at looking for trends, looking for patterns, analyzing the information, and machines can do it very, very quickly. But you still need human reasoning to make good decisions. You're making database decisions, but you're doing it with your human reasoning lens on it. So yeah, great point, great question. And great points by you, Erin, that we're not quite ready for machines to be making all of our decisions for us. All right, I have another question. Where do you think the biggest time savings will be when implementing this type of technology?
Everywhere. Honestly, I think in interpreting data, and so that we're able to surface a lot of insights and trends a lot more simply using kind of these data product tools. And so we're going to be able to surface this information much faster, and we're going to which makes it easier for us to consume. Is that it's very easy to understand a trend line going up than having to look at that data within Excel and kind of make your own predictions about what's going on with the data over time. And so being able to integrate those data-driven decisions will be so much faster and easier when the data is consumable and simple.
Yeah. And I think, you also brought up I don't know if it was in your case study or just a different anecdote that you shared about the amount of time it takes to pull together quarterly reports, and how now you'll be able to get that in minutes instead of hours, right? So kind of goes back to the question to the audience, is thinking like, where do you spend what are the areas where you spend time where this type of technology is going to be beneficial to you? Because it might be different for everybody, right? So whether that's tracking down people for training, or it's determining when your line needs maintenance, or it's, investigating a CAPA and determining the root cause. when you start to think about all those different tasks and how much time you put into them, you can start to apply what the value of the technology is in those time savings. And then the hours that you save, could those hours be used for more valuable tasks, right? Could you be doing things within your organization that provide more value to the organization than the mundane, which, you know, we're all happy to pass mundane tasks on to somebody else. And in this case, it would be the machine, right? It looks like that is all the questions that we have for today. I want to thank everybody out there for joining us. I hope you found the information useful and valuable today, and that you'll be able to take some of this back to your organization to make decisions and maybe implement some of this technology yourselves. I want to thank Erin for her time and her expertise. She always has really great information to share and is very passionate about improving the processes we have for quality and manufacturing, and allowing companies access to these types of tools that can help them make their time better. If you have any other questions about MasterControl and about the MasterControl product, you can always learn more at www.mastercontrol.com. And there are a variety of places on the website where you can actually request a demo if it's something that you'd like to see in deeper detail. Thanks again for your time today, and we'll see you next time.